I'd like to have us all do the Pledge of Allegiance. Raj, would you like to lead us now?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Several things. Tim is not here. He's actually in Montana right now. So True, our police chief, is kind of in his stead. And I'm not sure he's asked you about agenda posting reports. Oh, he has? Yes. Okay. So he usually does the roll call. I don't know if you want me to do that or if you want to do that. I can do
If
that.
you wouldn't mind, I don't have a lot of
Okay.
minutes.
All right. So A is roll call, and we have member Such.
Here, is that what I said? Yes.
Yes. Okay. Member Rambo.
Here.
Member Wright.
Here.
Member Garaventa. Here. Member Hawkins.
Here.
Member Peacock.
Yep.
Member Lambert.
Here.
Okay, so that we have a full deck, and we have definitely have a quorum. Report on the agenda posting.
Posted at noon on March 5th, 2018 on the Sonora Police, or I'm sorry, the City of Sonora website, as well as copies to members.
Okay, great.
What date did you post it?
The 5th.
March 5th.
Approval of the agenda. Is there any corrections, additions, subtractions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to that. Item D. D is public forum. Also, I should announce at this point that we don't have the key to the planning department, where the microphone system turns on and off. So I'm going to ask everybody that speaks to speak as loud as you can. If you can't hear us, let us know and we'll speak louder. So a public forum. Public may address the task force on any item that of public interest not otherwise on the agenda that is within the jurisdiction of the task force. No action may be taken. Matters to be addressed may be referred to city staff or placed on the subsequent meeting agenda. Speakers are limited to a 5-minute presentation. Is there anyone who would like to speak on the stuff? Arthur, go ahead. And it's stuff that's not on the agenda.
Well, yeah, that was a question. I had asked to have something added to the agenda and it wasn't. It's probably looped in to the panhandling loading part,
Okay.
but I was asked to have True look into the trespass to up the days more than 30, and Tim was going to talk to him about that.
Okay, I would consider that part of that agenda item. We can talk about it at that point.
Okay.
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 Is there anything?
I have also asked this of the city, and I would like to ask the task force if they could be helpful, but I do believe that we should have prior approved list of facilities available so that if the weather requires an open shelter, we have the preparation done ahead of time. I realize that that does take a lot of time and effort on the day when the weather may change, but we can't pull it off if we don't have this prepared, and it would take some effort to pre-approve the facilities. I understand from the county they have to have ADA-approved bathrooms, so it would be limited, but I think we should have at least step 1 done, and that could possibly be driven by this council. Thank you.
Anyone else? Carol?
Well, I'm now homeless, so I have a vested interest. So it was pretty cold out there. And there was a lot of discussion today up at the Lambert Center on how we were just absolutely appalled that people in the Jamestown area spent their own money for a dumpster to clean up some of those old campsites. So I think Waste Management should get some phone calls and some complaints about why they didn't either give them a discount or pony up a dumpster so we could deal with this trash area and a fire hazard and a health and safety hazard and everything else. And some people also talked to me today that I guess they're going to be asking St. Matthew's Lutheran Church to see if they could spend money for a dumpster next week perhaps. And I think that's equally appalling. And we should be asking Waste Management to either pony up some dumpsters or give us a discount or something, because this should be a city government or a county government collaborative effort and not on the wallets of the citizens of our city and county.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we'll go to E, unfinished business. Actually, before we get to that, I was wondering if if the task force would like to agendize what Mary Lynn has brought up about pre-approval of sites. Yep. So we can consider that consensus that, so we'll ask that that be agendized on our next task force meeting.
So,
So,
can I ask a question? It usually says no discussion. So.
yeah, we can't discuss the item other than whether we, want to
Would that be a
agendize it.
collaborative effort with the county and the city meeting together as a group, or just here? Because that's out in the, a lot of that goes on, not just down in Jamestown, but in other areas as well.
Right.
And it should be something that could be dedicated.
Well, as you know, our task force is kind of limited
Right.
with the city, so I think we can discuss all of that, but we need to, do that in that context. So. Okay, unfinished business, there's none. F, new business, discussion and possible recommendation regarding regulations concerning panhandling, loitering, animal waste, and similar offenses. True, do you have any report on that, or?
Well, I can talk about those specific statutes and or lack thereof, what we currently have. So I'll address the first one, which is panhandling. So panhandling is actually, we have a municipal code that addresses panhandling, but it's actually aggressive solicitation is what our municipal code is. And aggressive solicitation, according to our code, requires that the panhandler, the solicitor, is aggressive in nature, hence its title. And so we define that in our code as directing a solicitation towards a specific individual. Certain locations, bus stops, banks, and areas where ATMs, in areas where people would feel cornered, and coming within, like approaching and coming within 3 feet of someone in order to solicit, yelling, cursing, threatening somebody if they don't give them donations. So outside of that, it's legal to stand on the corner somewhere and hold a sign and ask for donations. So we get calls, several times a week about panhandlers. I think a very popular spot is over there in the Walmart parking lot, kind of by Panda. That's very popular. We get calls a lot. Most of the time, we just go out there and make sure it's not aggressive panhandling. We talk to the people who called, and then, we advise them sometimes, hey, by the way, you're getting complaints, but, we can't take law enforcement action on it. So that's panhandling as far as how it applies to solicitation in the city of Sonora. The next one would be loitering. Now loitering on its face, it's an older statute, and probably 19, 20 years ago, it had changed, and part of the requirements to charge someone or arrest somebody for loitering is that they have to be loitering with intent to commit a crime. So if someone's just hanging out in front of your store, regardless if you have a sign up, and they're just there, they're loitering, whether or not they have lawful business, it's not criminal until we can prove their intent to commit a crime. Any questions on that before I go into the next one?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me out there? I'm sorry.
Very good.
Okay.
So the question I had was, you mentioned it was code. Now, are we talking city code, county code, state code?
So the municipal code I was talking about was our city code when we're talking about panhandling. The loitering, we do not have a loitering statute in the city. So that's California
So the state
penal
code-
code is a state loitering violation, 647H, I believe, the California penal code, and that's what we would use for loitering violations. However, they're very difficult. The courts continue to throw them out because you have to prove intent to commit a criminal act by doing so.
Okay, Matt, did you have a question?
With panhandling, it kind of comes down to the same thing of, like, somebody was standing on a corner with a sign that says, you know, I like Jimmy Aravena, that kind of thing. You can't just kick them out of there for holding a sign. It goes down to that same type of thing. I was trying to come up with something funny, but I figured somebody would laugh somewhere. But it comes down to that same First Amendment right. Am I correct in that?
That's correct, because they're not aggressive in nature. And that's actually a freedom of speech. So we get Walmart calls a great deal about people out there trying to solicit signatures. It's freedom of speech. We can't prevent them from doing that. And unless they are aggressively interfering with other people's business there, and the store's ability to maintain their business, it's perfectly legal. So we get calls of those a lot, and all we do is try to find a peaceful resolution between the store owner and the people out there trying to get signatures, and they usually agree to step off to the side and you know, have their table out of the way so they're not blocking the path of anybody. So that would kind of be about what you're getting at. But yeah, freedom of speech. So we're not going to infringe upon that.
Yeah, I used to get pushed to make those calls when I was at Walmart. Hey, we got such, you know, and I'm, so, okay. That's all I have.
Did you have something? Anything over here?
I just, in my reading, read that cities actually get sued for trying to enact panhandling, unless it's aggressive. They get sued for it because it's a violation of First Amendment rights, like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, I was thinking, and he said there's one for the state, but we don't actually have one for the city. So the city could actually legislate something, enact one specifically?
In theory, yes. For loitering?
Yeah.
Yeah, in theory, yeah. And then a lot of laws, this is, and I don't know this to be true, you need a lawyer and all that stuff, but there's a lot of laws that you can't be any less than the state law, but you can be more strict. You can be stricter, not more, or more strict. I'm not sure if that applies to every law, so, you know, it depends. But in theory, I suppose you could always look at it. First of all, let me make sure there's any more questions of the task force on these two items, panhandling and loitering. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and we'll treat the animal waste and other similar offenses in a separate break because I want to get some public input just on these two, panhandling and loitering. So if anyone has anything that they want to talk about strictly on panhandling and loitering, you can come on up and have your say.
I have two questions, Mr. Officer. One, is it illegal for the people to panhandle in the center divider? Because that would seem like a safety
Only in
hazard.
such that they're in the roadway and they shouldn't be.
But they can
But
stand in between the...
Not the act itself.
Okay, so they can stand in, okay. Secondly, and maybe any of you can answer, because I don't know the answer, is when the St. Vincent de Paul or anybody like that come to take donations, is there a permit that they need to get for taking those donations? Or can they just go wherever they'd like and put the bucket out and take the donations?
So,
So-
I don't if you don't have to do that, or a fire department or any of that.
Pardon?
I don't believe you have to do that. I think it's just an agreement that you're going to do it, and you check and you make sure the rules with the city or the county in relation to when they do that and how they need to do it, and probably from the overall agency parameters as well.
That's why I'm asking. You know, sometimes in some areas, and I don't know this area well enough, some areas state that you have to go register as a nonprofit to come, like you do, to be able to take charitable donation. So, and I understand these people need money, I do. But at the same time, I would imagine that Walmart or Panda Express, as you're stating, that's private property, correct? Or am I wrong?
Correct.
So that would be trespassing on private property or not?
It's private property that's open to the public for public use, to go to the shopping center and use the stores, use the restaurants. So it's very difficult. DA doesn't like to touch those. So we have a lot of times someone will be trespassed from Walmart just because they've committed crimes there. Walmart doesn't want them back. So we give them the advisement. The law enforcement goes out there, and on behalf of the Walmart, we assist with giving the advisement. And we've even gone so far as requesting a complaint for a violation of that when they return. The district attorney is really cautious to file charges on those type of trespassing issues when they are not interfering with business the second time, or the return time, because it's almost seen as a civil trespass. So yes, it is private property, but it's open to the public, just like Walmart is.
Okay. Thank you.
So what he was alluding to also is a real nuisance, is when you're in your car, stopped at a stoplight, in town, going out of town, wherever, where the fire department comes right up to your window and knocks on it, and you donate this, or someone with a sign does this very same thing, and it's kind of dangerous, actually. There's no sidewalks, it's just the side of the road where cars make a double, they cross over into that line and go out that way. I mean, I think he has a somewhat of a point, and it's not aggressive or anything.
Well, if you are approaching a vehicle in the roadway,
That's a danger.
that borders on aggressive.
Okay.
Number one, you should be in the roadway. Interesting contrast with the fill the boot. I never even put that together.
Oh, yeah.
However, but yeah, if you are coming up and like, you see in the big cities where they start washing your windows, they're invading your space. So part of this is approach within 3 feet of you. So they're approaching you, they're coming at you and get within 3 feet. They would have to do that to come wash your window or something like that. So that would fall under the area of aggressiveness or the solicitation.
So down there by Lime Kiln Road, where from Stockton Road onto Lime Kiln, that's where I see it all the time, and it's very scary. Not the person, he's very pleasant, but it's scary, the scenario where he is, that he could get hurt himself or hit or something like
Yeah.
that. So it's a kind of a reverse thing, but nonetheless, it's an annoyance at the same time.
So in that case, if they're in the roadway, pedestrians can't be in the roadway, for one, so there's that. So we definitely go out there and tell them, you can't be in the roadway, and if they continue, then, we'd be able to sign up for that.
I've seen it.
And then, if they're actually approaching vehicles and knocking on their windows to roll them down or trying to wash the window, yes, that would be aggressive panhandling. Or at least in my interpretation as a law enforcement side of it, and not a prosecution side of it,
Right.
based on what our statute reads. So yes.
So that leads me to a question. You mentioned that you would go and cite somebody. How, you write a ticket, basically.
That would be a citation, yeah.
Okay.
Just a ticket, a cite and release, and a notice to appear for an infraction.
Okay. Repeated events. How long, is it always a citation, or does it get to a point to where you put the cuffs on and book them?
I'm trying to think of this particular, you talk about our solicitation statute,
Sure.
if it has
Either one of these two, loitering or
well, loitering is a misdemeanor.
okay.
So if we reach those elements of loitering,
Mhm.
and we can't say that they're there with intent to commit a crime without any other lawful business, that is an arrestable offense. Now, it is a misdemeanor. Many misdemeanors these days, instead of going to jail, you will get a citation anyway, simply because there's no room for them in the jails with, you know, Prop 47, AB 109. Our jails are filled with felony commitments, our local jails. So they would likely get a citation either way, whether it's an infraction.
But that would be a court-imposed citation as opposed to, you said it was a misdemeanor, meaning that you don't cite him, you take him in.
No, we do regularly cite for misdemeanor violations.
Oh, okay, all right.
Right, even though it's considered an arrest, it's called a non-custodial arrest.
Oh, okay.
It's still an arrest.
Okay.
We still require them to show up at the police department and get their fingerprints done. We take a booking photo of them, an arrest photo in the field. So it's an arrest, but we're given a notice to appear. Basically, we're cutting out the booking process, which generally that's what they would be doing anyway. They would booking them, fingerprint them, photograph them, and give them a court date.
Okay.
So we would be doing that in the field in a lot of situations. In some situations, if there's an indication that the offense is going to continue, then yes, they would go to jail. If it's a public intoxication issue, that's a misdemeanor as well. But if we got nowhere for them to go and they have nowhere to go, the safest place for them to be is in jail until they sober up. So we kind of try to weigh what the options are, and if the offense is going to continue or if a notice to appear is going to make the effect of getting them to court and having them held responsible for it without any other issues.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that a lot of it is depending on the circumstances of what's going on with them at the time?
Absolutely.
Okay. Is there any other public, or did anyone have any more questions on that particularly? Okay. Is there any more public on panhandling and loitering?
All right, on the loitering side, maybe we could get counsel to figure out legally on what Drew talked about, because I know when a business sells alcohol, we're required to put signs up saying no loitering, no consuming alcohol. So from a state standpoint, I can't allow loitering in front of my business because I sell alcohol. So it doesn't matter what kind of loitering. Like Drew says, they have to be in the act of breaking the law, but when you read ABC's website, people just hang out. There's reasons why they don't want people to do that when you sell alcohol. So maybe we can clarify that a little bit,
Okay.
so we know exactly.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that he's saying, that Drew is saying that, the chief is saying that loitering, you can arrest them based on intent, but because of the ABC license you can't have any kind of loitering at all.
Right, and I'm required to post it even.
Okay, so yeah, we can, we'll get a clarification on that, unless you know something.
I don't offhand, there could be an ABC violation or Business and Professions Code violation, unless one of my high-speed members of my department have that answer. No, I don't have that.
To your presentation, but that's all I can think of. As far as feet within a highway and that kind of thing, you may be able to add stuff to it. But.
So is that something though that, I mean, like Mary Ann, Chief to go like to a merchant's meeting and explain that kind of a thing? Because I'm not sure everybody really understands that.
Well, we'd have to have our council look at that first to see,
Right.
you know, to make sure that
Because that's
I
what
don't
they
mean just
tell
the
me.
alcohol, and I just mean there's a loitering rule of aggressiveness or whatever it is you're saying. That kind of thing.
Well, there was the panhandling was the aggressive one, right?
Well, but the
Correct.
loitering ordinance
Loitering.
too,
Intent to-
The loitering was the intent to commit a crime
commit a crime, right?
and be in there without lawful business.
But those
The
kind of things.
panhandling was
I don't know if
aggressive.
this makes sense,
They know
and
that.
it's kind of like when you said to call, and that, because you know them, that you kind of straighten out their behavior. But that is true that sometimes, I think some of the situations that have occurred probably would have been something to call law enforcement for, or you know, it was more than just someone hanging around or coming into the store, you know. It's bothering people or approaching them or, you know, so. Okay.
Did we get everything answered for you there so far? Arthur?
Yeah, well, yeah, just check with Tim and see if he can figure out
Yeah.
what the,
If ABC is different.
Right.
Is there anyone else that wants to have any discussion on, or any input on just strictly the loitering and panhandling portion? Okay. We'll go on further and discuss what the regulations are for animal waste and similar offenses, and you might want to talk about human waste as well, if that's different than animal waste, and how you pursue that and all that.
Well, so California does not have a state law addressing dog waste, animal waste, or the removal of such, but many counties and cities do. It's very common, actually. So there's lots of models out there to look at, and most of them have to do with, it attaches to the quote-unquote leash law violation, the control of dogs, control of animals, and that's where I would recommend if we do adopt an ordinance here, that it would fall under that particular section. But we do not have in the city of Sonora a municipal code that addresses dog waste or its removal. We have an animal nuisance ordinance, and basically it's called control of dogs. It covers keeping them on the leash. It covers keeping them in control. It covers whining and baying for extended hours of time. If you really wanted to, well, I'm not comfortable doing it, but I mean, there's some wording in there that if the dog presents a hazard to public safety or welfare, something like that, then maybe a stretch of that could be, well, maybe dog waste, you know, could fall under those guidelines or those terms. But I as a law enforcement officer, and I would not feel comfortable issuing a citation for under the current statute that we have. So if this is something we want, it would be something that the council would have to adopt, and you know, obviously with the advice of the attorneys on how to word that. So that's pretty much the animal waste issue in a nutshell. You know, you can go to some of the parks, and there's some signs that we try to, well, the city tries to deter that type of activity, but in my opinion, it's really not that, it's not enforceable right now under statutes we have.
How do you treat, if you know that it's human waste, how do you treat that?
I don't go anywhere near it.
Well,
I call one of my outstanding.
these two guys are for, right?
Sergeant Lawrence is
the
our
newest hire.
No, so,
I mean, that's under health and safety codes, right?
you know, and a lot of what the complaints we're getting is that the people are doing it on the side of buildings. So, in a lot of ways, it's being done seems intentional in nature. So you also have a vandalism issue there. So yeah, the human waste is a crime. If you know, put it on someone's doorstep, or oddly enough, we had a call for service yesterday where neighbors were actually assaulting each other with it.
Oh, nice.
So yes, if there are crimes involved in that sense,
So that has more to do with the actual act.
correct. Because, dogs, animals relieving themselves is not malicious in nature. And so that's why there's no
There's another
state
choice.
regulation that would fall under. So there's no malicious intent there. So basically, that's where we're at in a nutshell with any type of dog waste ordinance or state law.
Okay. Questions on any of that?
That statement, I think it's worth taking a look at. I mean, I think when a lot of the laws that were put in place years ago, no one looked at, hey, we're gonna have to get after people in 100 years because they won't clean up after their dogs, because it was common sense. I mean, it was, years ago that a wagon would go by, or 120 years ago, a wagon would go by and pick up the manure left by the horses. As we got to be a cleaner society and that sort of thing, I think it was just common sense, but unfortunately, there's some common sense left out there somewhere, and I don't know, maybe it's something that we can take a look at as a council.
Well, let's get public input before we decide to do anything.
I just can't imagine calling the police because someone else didn't pick up their dog waste. I just. I don't
Well,
know.
a merchant might, in front of their store or something like that, if it's yours, but, yeah, I mean, it's a awkward kind of,
yeah.
over and over and over again.
And they see it, they see the same person walking the dog, and then they leave themselves in the same place, yeah.
So I thought, I heard that.
I think we can over
Sure, it
level
is. Some people do.
law enforcement
But it is
with
what it
all
is.
of this.
But, I mean, I would even think the city would even entertain those dog baggy station things.
Well, one has
We
been
discussed that
donated.
at our last meeting.
One has been donated.
Yeah, I think there's
Actually,
three were donated.
It's gonna be three.
Oh, I thought one was donated, but the city had to buy the others. Yeah.
So those will be in the park areas or along.
As
No, I
like
think-
that, the design's not been fully determined and the location's not been determined, but we have an organization that's willing to donate up to 3. So,
I might offer that, if that's the direction the city is going with the dog waste collection points, there may be an expectation attached to those that there's something enforceable if people fail to use them. So, and you're considering whether or not to recommend an ordinance for dog waste or animal waste, that might be something to think about.
What?
Hint, nudge this.
If the task force is interested, I think I have an example of Orange County's ordinance would you like me to read it? Are you interested in hearing that? Sure. So what Orange County's ordinance for dog waste or animal waste says, a person having custody of any dog shall not permit, either willfully or through failure to exercise due care or control, any such dog to defecate or urinate under any public area, private property, county park, or beach. The person having custody of any dog shall immediately remove any feces deposited by such dog. And I believe they had that as an infraction, citable offense. So there's plenty of examples I found online. Many California agencies are doing it. So, there are ways to do it legally. And I think may have better luck with that one than maybe some of the other thoughts we were talking about earlier.
So, Mary Ann, is that one of the things, why it's on here is because the merchants have said that?
Is
It's
that
on the
written on
agenda.
that?
It's
Oh,
on the-
no.
About animal waste.
No, that was a different issue that wasn't really related to the homeless, was the animal waste. I don't think anybody mentioned it to me.
Oh, okay.
No, I know one merchant has had trouble with a person who's just a disrespectful person that's not homeless. Because when we're talking about these incidences, it's not always a homeless person. Some of these are just disrespectful people, so, yeah. So, no, there's been some merchants who've had trouble and they've been power washing the sidewalk and then we've had the discussion about the bags, but, you know, with dog waste, it's more of a nuisance, and it's a waterway issue for pollution. For human waste, it's more of a health and safety because of hepatitis A, B, and C. I feel like, you know, but that's, I mean, how are you gonna arrest someone or enforce that? You're not gonna see, you're not gonna see it happen, so I don't know.
Our ordinance covers urinating in public as well.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's clearly enforceable. You know, not even, if you don't even go into health and safety code violations, we have an ordinance directly addressing that.
Okay.
So that would also bring up then under the similar offenses, and I know this is gonna sound weird and everybody's gonna laugh, but I've heard some of the complaints being around the bars at night where people are vomiting out in the streets and on the walls and, you know, in the flower things, you know, that kind of thing too. So is that what you mean by similar offenses here on the agenda? Is that issue?
I think we can certainly discuss under that. I didn't put the actual wording in, Tim put the actual wording in, so, but I think similar offenses was basically put there to have basically a catch-all if we find that there's other things that are.
Which is disrespectful.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I agree with you. I was thinking when we were talking about the animal waste thing, how exactly that is directly relatable to the homeless problem. The only thing I could think of is if it's in the camps, it would be. But, you know, how do you determine whether it's back downtown? Well, exactly. And so, you know, it's kind of a bit of a stretch to kind of bring it into the homeless part of it, other than to deal with it in the camps.
But it's also anybody, it's not just homeless, it's people that are tourists and have their dogs with them or anything
Right.
else. The city does not have any kind of a real ordinance
Yeah.
posted anywhere about that kind of thing. If you're really looking at that as an issue with the merchants and stuff
It
like that.
hasn't really, I mean, I've been, my dad had his business for 45 years, and I've had mine for 25, so I've been down here for, you know,
75 years.
60, almost 60, so I've been here 60 years. But,
Oh.
I mean, I don't see it being any different. It just seems like it's more of whether you notice it and clean it up or not. And I think if we get the 3 stations of bags, it's going to, at least if they don't clean it up, you know, we have the option to do it, you know. And I'm going to have a hose when I do my plumbing for the front of the store, so I can, you know, hose off. Yeah, because if everybody on the block, at least there's one hose we kind of can share, we can clean it, you know, but we don't want it to go in the waterway, so we can clean up some and hose off the rest. I think it's definitely not one of our main problems.
Jim, can I just,
Sure.
I mean, I think feces is one thing. I think it's tough if you're walking a dog somewhere if they have to urinate. I mean, it's, you know, it's easy to pick up feces. It's not so easy to clean up urine. And I'm not sure you can stop it. What?
We have to put diapers on that.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
diapers on
So,
dogs.
I mean, we can like kind of I mean,
Well,
decent people will be doing that. Very, you know, people who are not disrespectful.
Right. Okay, well, go ahead. Did you have anything on the similar, you finished it all about the animal waste, but do you have anything under similar offenses, or is you pretty much said what you?
Not that comes to mind unless the task force has questions about, you know, something they feel is similar. I will just put it out there that just because there is a law enacted to enforce such offenses doesn't mean that we can always prove who is responsible for them or that we see them happen all the time. It's just another tool to try to deter that type of behavior. It's unlawful to run a stop sign in the city of Sonora, but it happens all the time.
But if you're not on that street corner,
Because there's never a cop around when you need one, right? So when we're there, they stop consistently. And if we're there, they're not gonna let their dog, you know, defecate on the sidewalk in front of us. But it doesn't mean there's no sense in doing it. I'm just saying, I wouldn't anticipate it being a fix-all, just to have an ordinance that prevents it. But it
So-
would be a good deterrent.
So in that light, do you use volunteer folks with your police department for a presence? Like you say, when they see somebody, an authority like that, they may not tend to do some of these things? I know you can't with your staff, because there's more other things that are way more important than poo-poo on the street.
That is one of the greatest benefits, well, one of the many benefits of having a volunteer force is it's an increased presence. And anytime there's a presence, there is a deterrent, a visual deterrent for crime. And it's an extra set of eyes and ears out there. So maybe they see the dog relieving themselves, and we do have an ordinance, then, you know, we can deal with it. But yeah, that is a huge benefit of having our volunteers. And they patrol on vehicles, and they also patrol on foot.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up public comment on animal waste and similar offenses.
My soapbox topic. So I don't know exactly what this had to do with the homeless, so I wasn't quite sure why it was on the agenda, except that the homeless were being accused. So
Probably
similar
that's
offenses.
probably the reason.
Yeah, so, but I think it reflects what kind of community we want to see ourselves be. So I would invite any of you. I didn't notice on Washington Street, but there's poop, by the way, in front of the police station. Which I saw when I was walking over here. There's a big pile. But, like, where you would go up onto that parking area.
Oh, on the side there?
Yeah, on the side of like
On
where
the
you're
corner.
going. It's right there on Green Street. And then there was
I'll have
poop
one of
in
my
several,
high-speed.
yeah. And then there was several deposits there by the Bradford Inn. And so I'm not sure I want my police force running around watching who poops and who pees where. But we all know who they are. There's one particular person with her great big dogs, and she just deliberately walks down the street, watches them poop and pee, and keeps right on going. Then there's the guy with the 2 Irish setters, and he lets them pee and poop everywhere. And then there's the woman with the red truck, and she deliberately, we think, lets her dog pee on everything. So we have merchants who have, you know, merchandise outside, and then the dogs pee all over stuff they're trying to sell. So my response is, don't put your crap out on the sidewalk then, because you have a brick and mortar store, keep it inside. But the dogs, as well as some of the humans, are peeing, like in the alcoves, and I think it's Columbia Marble, but maybe it's not, there by where JT's is in the bridal lot. Well, it's all getting stained from all the dogs peeing everywhere. So this is a citizen responsibility thing. And then, you know, humans are down in the alcove by, what was that, the Miners' Shack? So they're always, you know, having sex or shooting drugs or peeing, pooping, whatever there. And the similar offenses I took to mean all the vomit. So that to me would be an ABC thing, because the vomit tends to occur in certain spots. So I don't know if we have a public health situation in our community that we need to be on red alert for, or we have bars that are over-serving. So I think we need an ABC sting to look for over-serving, because I see an awful lot of people staggering down the street. So we do have 3 nonprofits that have volunteered to purchase animal waste stations, because they couldn't take it anymore. So I would invite any of you to walk down the street, because usually on a Sunday morning I can find 7 deposits. And that's usually dog poop, and then I'll find an average of like 3 or 4, I don't know what you want to call them, barf piles, you know, our public health issue, but it's disgusting. So we as a community need to make a decision on how we want to portray ourselves to each other, because I don't necessarily think it's the homeless, I think it's our friends and neighbors. So there is something we can do short of involving the police, and that's public embarrassment and humiliation. So one woman who let her dog poop up and down the street, she got chased into a shop trying to hide from people. as they confronted her about go out and clean up after your dog. So I'm not a social media person, but maybe we need some youngster to create some kind of website for poop offenses. And then everybody snaps a picture of them and their dog doing whatever, because we have a dog park, you know, and I think I saw 3 or 4 pet way stations there. But I don't know if anybody knows we have a dog park. And then there's the park further down the street, and like, if I was a dog, I think I'd rather pee on the dirt and the grass. So I don't know why you can't come, I'm sure the county won't like that, but empty your dog in the park and then go for a walk. But, so maybe if we had a Facebook page or whatever with everybody's picture and their dog misbehaving in public. But it's gross, and after we cleaned up the sidewalks, it was amazing how different the smell was. Because it's all dry urine and it stinks. And who wants to walk over poop and vomit? That's just gross. So I'm not sure it's a homeless issue, but it's certainly a community issue. And so I don't know how you justify that, because I don't think it's all the homeless. I think it's our friends and neighbors who are just irresponsible and rude.
Anyone else?
I just have, is this, before I go up, is this issue about dog poop? Or is this about poop in general? Like human fecal matter? I mean, we've thrown throw up into the mix now. I'm reading what you guys put on the piece of paper. So I don't know if it's proper for me to come up there and address human fecal matter because it's not on the paper.
You brought it up.
That's a similar offense.
So it's all right?
Sure.
Humans are animals. You got my
Grass the other two.
Jim opened the door all the way.
Okay, like I said, I just want to be proper. I don't want to.
No, I mean, we're here.
I would be concerned. I agree with what you said about dog pee. There's no way to stop that. You know, that's just how it's going to be. And I agree with you also with human fecal matter is hepatitis issues, health issues. You talking about washing down the sidewalk. If that's human feces, you can't do that. That's illegal. That's now creating biohazard. My issue, and you know, people have the right to go to the bathroom. Of course they do. But my issue would be with the camps, with not only the dogs, but human defecation as far as contaminating an area. I printed this out, and they didn't have this 10 years ago, but they have it today. San Francisco has always had a homeless problem. But now, San Francisco has a website that shows you where the fecal matter is and how to stay away from it. So that if you go on vacation to San Francisco, you don't have to worry about human waste. There's another one. This is actually another website that shows you where the most poop is, human poop. Then they also tell you about where broken glass is and hypodermic needles are. My concern is this. My concern is the environment as far as what is going to be the byproduct of, and I'm just going to use one place for an example, and that's all it is an example. The side of Stockton Road, which is county property. It's not Sonora. When you have a lot of people camping there, it's not illegal. It's only illegal in Sonora. What happens to this land, private or public, that has had a huge amount of fecal matter there, and now we've created there's a biohazard that's been created. And what's the solution? That's it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
So are we gonna go to the trespass thing next, or is it part of this? It wasn't listed, but you said you were gonna put it on there.
Oh, similar offenses, so, yeah, come on up.
I can answer that real quick if you want. It's a penal code. It's 30 days if anybody open to the public, 12 months if it's closed to the public.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is, can we get that changed? Can we up the time? Because 30 days is not that long. And if I have to go to the police department every 30 days to keep somebody away from my business, I might as well do a restraining order on them. You know, and that creates more work for everybody else. So I would like to be able to raise that up past 30 days. Maybe that was just for Sonora. I don't know how to do it. I'm just putting it out there because,
Are you talking loitering at this point?
no, I'm talking about when you trespass somebody, it only lasts for 30 days. So if somebody, steals from me and I trespass them, it's only 30 days, which happened yesterday. And Janet was nice enough to send Rita over to talk to me about creating a dialogue to deal with the homeless. And at the exact time Rita came over, I was dealing with somebody that had shoplifted and I was putting a trespass on. And I don't want to have to go back and do that every 30 days. So I'd like really to work on that. Okay?
So, is that a state? It's a state thing.
Yes.
The 30 days is a state thing.
Yeah,
State
that's
code.
Right.
Okay.
I wonder if is it possible to make it longer, I wonder? Or is that something that's just gonna be completely regulated?
We'll have to look into that. Trespass through there. Well, I'm writing this down if anyone else wants to come up and say anything.
Could you explain that issue?
What's the difference between trespass and loitering? And
Some of us are confused. We don't know what you mean in 30 days of
So let me see if I can explain. Arthur, let me know if I got it wrong. So someone comes on someone's private property, they do something that they're not supposed to, or even, I guess, even if they just come on it. Trespass, there's no crime, is that correct, Arthur? It doesn't have to be a crime, just other than.
Doesn't have to be what I didn't hear.
Trespass, does trespass have to involve another crime? Or is
No.
it just trespass is trespass? Just,
Correct.
Okay. So if someone trespasses on your property and you don't want them on, from what I understand, you can keep them off your property for 30 days, and then they're able to come back. Oh, if you're, is this only for businesses or someone that?
No, anyone.
Anybody, even residential? Okay, so there's a 30-day banning period or waiting period that they can't come back on your property.
Without getting fraction, I guess, a misdemeanor or charge or something? Is that the way it works? Or?
So, 602 of the California Penal Code has, I believe, 19 subsections.
Yeah.
And as I alluded to a little bit ago, our DAs, and I've been speaking with the DA recently, or one of our deputy DAs, about it. So they're really cautious about this particular type of trespass, is where someone goes into a business, and that's probably the most common. If you're talking about a private residence, there's other sections of trespassing that apply. But this is somewhat open to the public, even though it's private property. So there's a verbal notification by a police officer that if you, and so the way the statute reads, if you return within a certain amount, within that 30 days, then you can be cited for the trespass violation. And this is something, again, talking to the deputy DA, is actually trying to research, because it's such an extensive statute, trespass in general. I mean, it goes from private lands to lands open to the public to private residences, closed residences to almond orchards. I mean, it is very, very extensive. And some of those, when it talks about open to the public, is as far as a prosecution point of view, is infringing on the civil side of it. So they're really cautious. But they are, this WDA is looking into it for us, because we get a lot of those complaints, and we do send those complaints over. So they're dealing with it, we're dealing with it. But yeah, so there's a notification process, and there's a time limit in most cases, like we're talking about, like Art was talking about, there's a 30-day time limit attached to it. And then if they return within that time limit, they're citable or arrestable for that violation of trespassing.
Thank you.
Did I miss anything, my high-speed associate?
The only difference is when like you're on public or on private property, it can be up to a year. So like a big field, we can actually trespass people for a year on that, but it has to be closed to the public, is where it changes the difference.
So that would be, Sergeant Wertz, that would be more of residential, not?
Yeah, or open land, open space type thing.
Oh, okay.
We dealt with that at the sheriff's office all the time. If you mentioned it to them, if you trespassed them, they couldn't come back for a year. And on that, we had to have a letter on file for that year period, trespassing the specific people.
It's the same with federal land also.
Could I ask for clarification? Is this mostly you're talking about homeless people going into your store or in your parking lot? How big a homeless issue is this? Is it general public, or is this a homeless issue? And does this get into the areas such as camping out, like on Truckenmiller, where people have been camping out there for a very long time on private property, and we somehow can't get rid of that? So what's the difference? Is it trespassing? Are they now squatters because they've been there so long, or are they just trespassing?
It is trespassing, so if it's owned by a private party, so prior to any camping ordinance that we had, if you're camping out on private property and the owner does not want you on that private property, you are trespassing. And, you know, if you're actually occupying it, so there's not much more that needs to be done other than the owner says, I don't want this person here, you're not supposed to occupy my private property.
Has that property been cleaned up? Are they?
Which property?
The Truckenmiller?
Truckenmiller, it's an ongoing, there's been some forward movement, but not a whole lot. We have to, you know, this is someone's private land. So I'm not gonna take my officers and post them there 24/7 to make sure no one trespasses. So there's some cooperation between us and the landowners. There's been some communication in that particular case that she's addressing. But yeah, that is a trespass situation. We've actually had issued arrests and citation, physical or custodial and non-custodial arrests for trespassing in that area.
Thank you.
Okay, any other public comment on this?
Hi, I'm Shelley Muniz, and I just wanted to say that I was just down at the Stockton Road camps just a few minutes ago, and we delivered a dumpster down there. Some of you probably know that already, Community Solutions Group, a couple of days ago, and it's almost full. They are working really hard to clean that camp up. So just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else on this item? Okay, I'll bring it back to the task force. The agenda item is discussion and possible recommendations. So if you want to talk about what kind of recommendations, it's certainly we want to do. What we want to do. I think it would be a good idea personally that we do look into having a city code for animal waste where we don't have one now. But anyone else want to chime in while we're...
That's good. Where does it go from here? I mean, it's great, it's a discussion and an idea now.
Yeah, it would be a recommendation to the city council.
Okay.
Yeah, I already stated it, and I'll say it again. I think I said before, it's gotten to the point where my oldest son is downtown an awful lot, and he was yelling at some people going, pick up your dogs, it's just, we're tired of it. We gotta do something, and like I said before, unfortunately, you can't legislate common sense, but in this case, we're gonna have to do something.
Okay, so we found out today that we already have a city code that deals with panhandling. So is there any recommendation to talk about anything to alter or do anything with that code?
Other than, I think the merchants could be educated or take that understanding, so they know what they're really dealing with and how to do that. And I don't know if the police department does that, or you go back and do that.
Right.
I actually heard that.
I'll get together with you and we'll come up with sort of like some instructions, and we'll clarify some of the rules and what it would be a law enforcement issue, what might be something you would deal with, and something that, you know, we would have to deal with by not giving money and not offering, you know.
Yes.
So that there's sort of a 3-point thing, and then we'll just have Zach run it off at the print shop, and then I can distribute it to the merchants. Something very simple. Okay,
Good.
Okay, when it comes to loitering, we know that there's a state code, there's not a city code. Is there any discussion on whether to have a recommendation to look into any kind of city strength code that would strengthen if possible, or do we want to kind of leave that with? The one thing that I think we definitely should look into is Arthur's question, whether ABC, alcohol beverage control, for those who don't know, the state ABC licensing trumps whatever, sorry I used that word, trumps the ABC, or trumps the loitering state code, whether there's a disconnect there, and whether actually the ABC comes into play at those ABC serving locations. So I think we can look into that, or have someone look into that. But other than that, is there any desire amongst any recommendation regarding loitering from what it currently is?
I guess this would be more for the ABC alcohol. I know in Jamestown, they talked to Barn Rights and another liquor establishment that sells the small liquor, to be cautious about selling to people that are obviously intoxicated, because that was causing some problems down in Jamestown for vomit and things like that. And you just do beer and wine, your store. Do you do hard alcohol? You do, okay. Because I was thinking the same thing about Cervantes, and because I found some of the little teeny whiskey and little vodka bottles at the doorstep in the morning, like they're sitting, you know. So I don't know if it's necessarily the bars. In Jamestown, it was more drinking the whole bottle at you know, on the streets, drinking straight, you know.
So, well, I'm not sure how that's not really the loitering, right?
No, well, I was thinking, I didn't know if we were talking about loitering or the vomit, that's.
Well, I was just going to start at this point and go through, but
Okay,
that's
all
fine.
right, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm just,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm just wondering if we need clarification, legal advice about this before we start making recommendations? I mean, about what really the ABC loitering
Well, yeah.
may be, what the ABC code is.
Yeah,
What's on the agenda for next time?
Yeah, I feel like,
do you want to revisit that on the agenda?
Yeah, always,
Okay.
just to make sure we're
We're on the same page? Okay.
with Tim's, when is Tim going to be back for the next one?
Yeah,
For his
I
input
think he's
also?
only gone until Monday. So, and he'd have to get legal counsel to look at, I'm sure.
Could we have a little humor, like if we're gonna have these little dog containers with basket, could we have vomit containers that they could just, and, you know, eliminate that?
you could probably use those gloves or bits or whatever they call them.
Yeah.
So there's another aspect to animal waste, and I know this is going to present a great heartache to a lot of people, but there's a growing concern with businesses where animals are being brought into the stores without being service animals. That people will say, no, this is my dog and he's a service dog, and a therapy dog and all this. Well, there's some places have signs actually posted on their
You must
doors.
be, yeah.
Others don't, and the dogs do go in there and they do things in the stores, even though they're supposed to be well behaved. And if there's more than one dog in there, it's a nightmare sometimes. And so that's a store issue, but it's
Right.
an issue of population of people have thinking they have the right to do that.
Yeah. And that's really kind of not part of our homeless task force, though. I mean, that's more of whether someone lets a dog in, what type of dog in the business is, and what ramifications are, it's not really. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's not the focus of what our group is doing now, so.
No, no.
Yeah. So we're gonna look into, have the lawyer, or have somebody look into the loitering, state versus, ABC, or the ABC versus the regular. Look at a code for animal waste for the city. What are we discussing about the similar offenses? Yeah. Do we want to have a recommendation on that, or do we want to just?
Well, I don't know that I would like specifically the homeless either, though.
No, not really.
I don't know if that's just bad.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think it would hurt like to have something in the paper of some things that people should be aware about when they are around town. I mean, just as some kind of an interest, I don't know how you write it.
Something Alex in the
But
paper.
Alex,
He has a list for us.
you know, something to the effect of, these are some of the concerns that come out of these kind of meetings. These things are brought up, whether they deal directly or indirectly. It's an educational aspect as well as a community pride aspect, as Carol was trying to point out.
That's a good one.
Just with the trespassing.
Oh,
Yeah. I think when I was working for Arthur, if I remember right, we had escorted someone out, I'll use the term escort someone out about 4 or 5 times, because they kept coming back at like 31 days and 32 days, there was something like that. And they were coming in essentially loitering, but I remember this going, why can't we get it in a longer time? So I really think it's something we should take a look at if we can do that as a city.
Is that a city council thing or is that a this thing? I mean, I don't really.
Well, I mean, we can
Also
cer-
too is not necessarily a homeless issue.
Can I say
But it is
something?
an
Well,
issue.
it's a matter of what you want
It's
to,
an issue.
what you want, as a homeless task force, what you all want to recommend.
Can't solve all the problems.
Certainly, us talking about it today will be brought up to,
City,
yeah.
yeah, that's fine.
That's
what you go.
There's 3 city council members in this room and amongst the 3 of us. And
Well, it's obviously a
videotape.
concern.
Yeah,
Whoever it is, it's a concern.
and while it might not directly be homeless, there'll be discussion, I'm sure. So are we satisfied where we are towards the possible recommendation? We're gonna bring it back the next time, but we're, looking for a city code, looking for the ABC difference on loitering versus the regular. Looking for city code on animal waste, although I'm not sure if that's a recommendation from us. Nothing, did we want to look at the panhandling city code before we made a final decision on whether it's what it needs to be, or?
So it's very clear.
Yeah, I think that was pretty clear.
Okay. Then I think we're set, right? Where we're going with this.
Is this something that the merchants would, I mean, since this is what we're supposed to be about, that issue, is this a thing that the merchants would view as having at least looked at it and went through the gamut of, is this part of the homeless thing, or is this part of the city and their responsibilities and the merchants' responsibilities as well? would this satisfy them in the fact that at least it was discussed?
Oh,
Because it was
absolutely.
brought up on your
Yes.
list here.
Yeah.
That these items were addressed to some degree.
Definitely.
Would it argue?
Okay. All right. Item number 2, continued discussion and possible recommendation regarding a low barrier approach to shelter. The last time we talked about this was 3 meetings ago. You were in Mexico. Was that 3 meetings ago? And we started on a list of possible different things to discuss. And then we were going to, we kind of tabled it until we could have Raj back with us, I think. I think that was kind of the idea. What we need to do is to move towards some sort of recommendation what we're going to give to the council, I think. Since it's been 3 meetings, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think it seemed like everyone was kind of moving toward a favorable opinion of the low barrier approach. Is that fair to say?
No.
No.
I think it's more favorable to research it,
Oh, okay.
to look into all the various aspects before there's any kind of recommendation to the city council about it. But, you know, that's not going to solve the problems we've been talking about, but it's certainly going to, you know, look at possibilities of ways to assist in the long run. But I don't think that was what the point was at that time, was to actually, I mean, I thought it was just more to research it right now, because we really don't know all that much. We have some ideas, but we don't know about the funding, who's going to maintain it, where the facility's going to be located, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I think
Well,
that's
and what the
their
city
committee
role
needs
is,
to do.
and ultimately what the city role is, because that's
Exactly.
this
Right.
purview.
So, I mean, I would
So-
recommend that we recommend a research group to really do the footwork and come back with some real solid information. I mean, Raj has given us the framework and what it could be like and how, but he also presented some of the problems and what could happen.
Okay.
Shouldn't this also be more county and city, because we're
Oh,
talking a lot of
absolutely.
issues from the
That's
county
part of the
side.
research.
I mean, maybe need a collaborative.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about the task force itself. I think in some ways we may have convened beyond our usefulness at this point, where we're now tending to issues that are really city council issues. We came into being to respond to some concerns about primarily, I would say, maybe homeless residents of our community creating a bit of a disturbance and other nuisances on Main Street particularly. So the way you solve that is to give folks another place to be that has some infrastructure and some services and support. Law enforcement right now, we've saddled them not only with law enforcement, but they're in effect operating as the de facto homeless outreach team. And without a whole lot of options of what to do. And that's a really, in my opinion, it's an unfair place to put our police department in. And so I agree with you, Janet, about, I think our recommendation really is, we have a problem. We know we need to address it. We need to offer an alternative that will hopefully be more than just a displacement. And we need to work with the county, with law enforcement, with healthcare, and various service providers in the community to really talk about a first step, which low barrier could be a first step. But homelessness is not going to be solved by a low barrier intervention. We may see a few cases, a few individuals transition from homelessness into being contributing members of society. But until we address housing shortages, housing costs, that's a long game. But I'm not sure how much more we can solve or even address by convening in isolation as a city task force. I think we need to assertively and intentionally transition this into a broader conversation, take what we've learned, offer it to that broader conversation, and try to move quickly to offer the merchants, law enforcement, and the homeless residents of our community a more positive alternative place to spend their days and nights, which will, my hope is to give providers an opportunity to build relationships and make some changes. And we see there are community members in the Lambert Center, Interfaith, the Atka Shelter. These are all small examples. And GSAC, give someone a chance. These are all small examples of people doing that type of direct work with folks and helping accompany people into something better. It doesn't work with everybody, but coalescing all that effort, coordinating, coalescing, and coming to a cohesive plan with all those stakeholders, I think, is really the only thing that would be worth our time moving forward.
Anyone else want to say anything?
No, because I think that's what we're all been feeling.
Okay.
No one's really wanting to say it.
Yeah.
But now that we've addressed some of those things for the merchants, because that was the original plan, that we've kind of, that's why I was asking, does this resolve some of those issues? And so the next question is, where do you go from here?
Right.
And the city, I would think the recommendation would be then to the city council that we would recommend that there's a collaborative event or gathering or something. I do know that there is a group that is looking into, and it's kind of, it's sort of like a community advocacy center idea. And there's some meetings underway and some looking into that kind of thing, which will probably, I'll have more information about that at the next meeting, perhaps. But I think that goes along with Raj's point that this is way bigger now. I mean, even with, I don't know if Tim sent me this thing on all this homeless stuff. Did you read it? And it had really almost everything related to the addictions and around behavioral health or lack thereof. And so how do we attack that to then address the long-range plan for the homelessness issue, which is just, I mean, it's never going to end. But we can certainly help to some degree some people who could benefit in that respect, but it's not, change everybody. So, yeah.
I agree with what, all these different parts need to be a part of, but to me, one of the biggest problems is mental health. We do not get the help we need for them. One of my gentlemen talked to me today about it. He said, you go for a crisis thing, okay, great. Now we see you and we take care of that, and now we can see you in 3 weeks or 3 months, or that doesn't work. So I think that is one of our biggest drawbacks, handicaps,
Well, I
working
think
with the homeless.
in that next iteration of this conversation, the broadening of mental health needs to be at the table. They do. And a deliberate invitation to them and an expectation that they be at the table and participate over the long haul, because it is a big piece.
It's a big piece.
But that's part of that collaborative thing.
Absolutely.
County and city to work together.
Because, and there's a number of things. When we presented our, the findings of the pit count that we did in the summer, it kind of naturally evolved into what we called a what's next convening of meetings, which had a broader group of stakeholders. And we paused that because of involvement with the task force here.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that group. A couple of law enforcement groups have had other convenings.
Yeah.
It's just, we need to bring the learnings that have happened in these other spaces, come together and get something done.
So would that be something that you could do, like an event with stakeholders, if you will,
It can't be a single event.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
to have a, kind of like you brought everybody together with the pit count, and you have something in the fairgrounds or the opera hall with these players,
Sure.
and you have an agenda of speakers and what they've determined, or what the task force has found, or what the recommendation is way beyond city, or just the county, or law enforcement, or anybody else. It has to be a collaborative thing. So how are we gonna do it?
Yeah.
And then go from there with something
I
like
think
that?
that'd be a good start. Yeah.
I take that on as huge.
I've actually been in touch a lot with the Kern County Homeless Shelter and one of the homeless court judges. The executive director of the Kern County Shelter and the homeless court judge both said they would come up and speak if that's something that we were interested in.
I think that'd be part of that collaboration.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. But that's what you have to do. You have to have something like a think tank thing, and you list all these things.
Well, and that report that you referred to is an excellent resource for the very thing that we're taking. Other communities have done this work ahead of us. We're different than those communities, but we can learn from them too. But I think we have to pull people together and expect that they'll show up to address homelessness in our community.
So are we asking them to take it back to city council and saying, we say this is much bigger, they need to get together with the county, with the rest of these entities? And that's
Yeah,
what we're
maybe
recommending?
write up a summary of what we have discussed, our thoughts on the matter, and then that's,
Take it to city
and
council.
then maybe all of us, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but maybe we all make a commitment that we will participate in that next
Move from here.
endeavor as well. So there's at least a small group committed to it already.
So it sounds to me like we need to,
And maybe Chief, you join us in that commitment, I don't know.
So recommend to the city council that we have addressed these issues of emergency concerns. And it sounds like that they're okay with the issues that we have addressed, that they brought forward, either through understanding what law enforcement has and some of the issues and the issues have said. And we talked about it, and we can't really go much further with it, other than the ABC thing, really.
so we're kind of, there's a couple of issues that we're having here. One is that we're kind of discussing the future of the task force on an agenda item that's not really set up for that. So what I propose to do is to set up some sort of framework that we kind of talked about and agendize it for our next task force meeting, the future direction of the task force. And
Our homework will be to think about that,
yeah,
and to have a list of ideas as well, or
Right.
thoughts
because we're kind of
going around with that.
yeah, we're kind of we are, and I agree with all pretty much of what Raj has said, but we're kind of discussing the issue that's not really agendized, so that's one problem. But it looks like it's at a point where it needs to come to a head for the greater
Community good.
the greater discussion that involves the county and involves other agencies. I'm not sure that we're at the point of this necessarily disbanding the task force or saying it's done with.
But you still have those two agenda things.
Uh,
You still have those two agenda things with the ABC thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's other things that are out there, I think, that a city homeless task force can still deal with, but I think we're finding out that our scope is so narrow that we need
It's a bigger job.
to go off on that and make a recommendation to council on getting involved with what Raj is saying with the larger collaborative group. So,
And I think it's important that we,
and
in
we'll
whatever,
agendize to that for the
yeah,
next meeting and have
whatever
something
statement
ready.
we have, we do our best to communicate to the business community, the business owners, that we really take those concerns to heart.
Yes, we do.
And there needs to be a response, but we can't do it in isolation.
Exactly. Okay.
And unfortunately, just, I don't know if it matters here, but for the record, I can't be here at the next meeting because I'm in Amador County doing this same thing in Amador, or a similar thing. But I can be here at the first one in April.
Okay. Okay. So getting back to the specific item agenda, Magna is making a recommendation on the low approach barrier. Low barrier approach, sorry. Trying to do things at once. So what I'd like to do is kind of narrow it back to that briefly and get public input on that specific thing. And then with everyone knowing that we're going to have this other item on the agenda next time or the next other time, depending on how it works out, about what to do as a task force with the larger issues. So, does anyone want to speak on the agendized item, which is discussion of possible recommendation on a low barrier approach? So come on up, whoever wants to go first.
All right, so back to square one again. I think we need to let everybody know that as a city that we cannot do a shelter. So I think we need to put that out there. Okay, so we need to say those words, as hard as it may be to say as a city, we cannot afford to or expect to do a shelter. But maybe we can work with the county and some private funding, maybe it can happen. So I think that needs to be said. So that everyone, business, the business people and the residents understand the direction that you guys want to go and understand, unless I'm wrong, that the city can't take this on. But we need to say that. And also, we need to remember in the process, though, that we continue to enforce what we have on the books, the no camping, the loitering, all these other things as a city, to still enforce these items, to hopefully, so that people understand that, there was some outcome. And also, let the homeless community, Lambert Center, let them know, hey, there's really no place to go here. Unfortunately, there's no place you can legally camp. Let's put it out there, it's true. So let's take those steps to do that. Thank you.
My thinking's going to differ a little bit. My name is Jim Willie. My immediate concern, which is almost past because winter's almost past, my immediate concern has been that we can provide emergency housing for the homeless when we're talking about freezing temperatures. Yes. Another winter's passing. I know we're years away from building any kind of permanent housing. We're not San Francisco with some of the money they can put into it now. My concern, again, is next winter will be upon us before we know it. I have a major question in terms of what does the city and county do when we've had large county fires? What have we done when people have been evacuated? Where do they go? Fairgrounds. Fairgrounds. It's an emergency. I would, I've heard from a number of sources that, we can't do this, we can't do that with the fairgrounds. When there's a fire, we do it. People are evacuated to the fairgrounds on short-term notice. There's water, there's light, there's heat, and there may even be cots and everything stored there because people come in when they're evacuated and it's an emergency right now. Why can't we use that as an emergency winter shelter. Thank you.
Well, I would just say that when we do use the fairgrounds as an emergency shelter, their money changes hands. So if we're using it as a homeless shelter, no money is going to be changing hands. And the fairgrounds want, the fair board, at least at the one time, wants no part of the homeless community at their facility. And I'm sorry, Raj, that you had to sit through all the discussion on dog poop.
We all had to sit through it.
Yeah, well, he looked really bored though. So my concern is that we already do kind of have low barrier shelters here. Jeanette has a facility during the day. And I see people, you know, they go to breakfast, they go to lunch, there's some places that are open, those seem to be kind of low barrier, but everybody's kind of reinventing the wheel on their own. So I think as a city, we should put forth that we would like to bring all these people together so everyone isn't functioning independently. So that, you know, the Methodist Church isn't on their own, Lighthouse isn't on their own, Heart Rock isn't on their own, because I'm not seeing a lot of people. You know, Heart Rock is doing 10 to 17 people at the most. And, you know, Lighthouse is 20 to 25. They get about 40 at the Methodist Church. But Columbia at Church of the 49ers gets 65. So are we really providing a service if they're not serving very many people, and why are they doing it? Anyway, I just think we should bring everybody together. And Mike was here and he wanted to hear what Raj had to say, but he couldn't wait any longer, so he had to leave because he was from St. Patrick's and the Matthew 25 breakfast. So I would like to have all those people come together and what it costs for them to provide these services, because they're doing it on their own dime in a way. And what ideas they may have, because I don't think we've heard from any of them through all this process. Because they're already providing, in my opinion, a low barrier temporary daytime shelter. And we should be looking at what to do for a nighttime shelter, because when I'm downtown and it's, you know, 20-something degrees, it's really cold. And I'm busy, I'm not, you know, so I don't know, maybe we should have a community camp out and we can all see what it's like to be outside for 10 or 12 hours at 25 degrees and there's no place to pee. So, I would kind of like to see that. And then I know they had narrowed down the director of behavioral health to 2 people to be selected, and they canceled their meeting at the last minute yesterday. So I don't know that they've made a choice. But when we get a director of behavioral health, we need to involve that person.
Absolutely.
You know, so I kind of think sometimes we're all wasting our time here because we're just talking. And the city council has a tendency to want to kick the can and kick it to somebody else and make somebody else make the decisions that they should be making as elected officials. So, but I still think there's some room for information gathering and bringing at least the church faith-based providers together in a room and figuring out how maybe we could do it more collaboratively, if that makes sense. Thank you.
I would respectfully like to remind you that you did agree to put the identification of buildings for nighttime emergency shelters on the agenda soon. So thank you very much for your comments. I'd like to suggest that at this meeting that you're putting together, that you specifically invite someone from Adventist Health and maybe MACT clinics and any other medical facilities that are in the county already, and make them fully aware of the need for this. It's not only behavioral health. Some of the others maybe could pick up a little bit more of the services and offer additional things. I know we talked at one meeting that Adventist Health didn't want to be a detention center, so we have to move people to, is it Modesto for 5150? So it's and it's
In and out of town.
it's a cost. It's a huge cost. So why couldn't we do that locally and more effectively here within the community? But I would say invite all available resources to come to that meeting to make them aware that that's a huge part of this problem. People who didn't have a problem before, after a year on the street, poor food and dealing with homelessness issues, develop a mental health barrier to normal life. So I would say they need to all be a part of that.
Raj, what you said was great. I thought everything you said was awesome, except one thing you left out. You talked about the homeless, the council, the police department. You didn't bring up the residents of Sonora, okay, which is the largest part of Sonora, which should be addressed. Secondly, the definition from when I was here 2 weeks ago of a low barrier was there's a lackadaisical way about coming in drunk, coming in if you've been on drugs, you'll still be taken in. If this gentleman, his proposal with a fire and we have the fairgrounds as a place to house the homeless, when there's a fire and these people come in, these people don't come in to be able to use alcohol and drugs. It's not a shelter for that. So maybe as an incentive for people to be able to have a shelter in town, there's no alcohol and there's no drug use allowed. Because I think the issue here that's on the piece of paper is low barrier and shelter. And the thing is to use that definition of low barrier as we're going to take people in that could be drunk or on drugs, I think that would be a concern. And I think that it wouldn't help with any kind of rehabilitation as far as people getting back on their feet.
One thing,
Good point.
I think we're kind of mixing the low barrier with the emergency shelter. I think there'd be a different expectation in an emergency shelter, first of all. And maybe when we were here, maybe you could define what exactly low barrier is, because I think we tried to define it. He was here at this last meeting, and I'm not sure that maybe we did it exactly the way it really is. So
Yeah, no,
Raj is the one that has the most expertise with the low barrier, so maybe he can.
Sure. Yeah, I think essentially you have the right idea. And the reason a low barrier shelter is what it is you want people who aren't doing very well in life to be at a place that is designed to care for them, so to speak. There are staff present, and you're getting them away from being downtown. If you don't allow folks in, we already run a high barrier shelter where there's no drugs, no alcohol, you can't be a danger to anybody, or criminal record, all that stuff is checked out before you get in. But it's still leaving the folks who are having trouble with nowhere to go. So part of it is, and folks who are either alcohol, drug, or other dependent, they're not going to go anywhere that has expectations of them right away. So creating an environment where they can hopefully get cleaned up, they can connect with service providers, social workers, medical care, and those relationships build, and hopefully over time, things will shift.
Well, as we see, things aren't shifting. I mean, in the Bay Area, they're not. I was just there yesterday, and it's looking worse than ever. Some people, some in this room, they're homeless and they don't have, there's nothing they can do about it. You know what I mean? But people can make the fundamental choice not to use alcohol and not to use drugs. Okay, they do have that choice. Like I said, people can get down on their luck and not have a choice of being homeless. I've had friends that are homeless. They didn't have a choice. They were down on their luck, but they got help and they rehabilitated. Maybe what we should start looking at is instead of just, one, mental health is huge. Right? That's been gone since Nixon. So, and it'd be great. I wish California's got so much money they should be able to fund it. And it's huge, but the deal is at what time frame? There's got to be a time frame at which one person can go shuffle through the system and not just use it indefinitely, because that's solving the problem. whether it be through identification and going, hey, you got your food today, you got your food yesterday, this, we're gonna try to work you to an area to where you can get on your feet, and that's the big issue. Like I said, you have a high barrier, why don't we call it a high barrier shelter? If these people can't get a grasp on their addictions, then, why should it affect the other people who are homeless that want to stay there also?
Yeah, the low barrier shelter, and I've said this in many cases, is a first step. It isn't the only step, it isn't the end-all be-all. There needs to be a number of things. And another piece of that with the timelines, having worked with this population for many years, is healing doesn't have a timeline that's uniform across people. 2 individuals can go in for tonsillectomies and their healing process is really different. So we're talking about folks who are struggling typically with multiple illnesses, psychological, mental, and physical. So that process of restoration is a long haul for most folks. And I'd love to see us have multiple strategies and interventions to be able to work with folks. You brought up the decimation of mental health care that goes back to Nixon. You're absolutely right. So the low barrier is not a fix for everything, but it is an initial step to help offset some of the issues that are pressing that brought this task force into being.
So do you think maybe we can change the name to high barrier?
Because
that's what's on the number 2.
Low barrier is the appropriate term, and it's kind of an industry term. You can call it anything. You can call it, Friendship Park, which some jurisdictions call it. There's a ton of things you can call it, but this is more just an industry term.
I'm just looking at the drug and alcohol use. That's all.
Oh, did you have a response
I
to that?
just had a response. At some of our earlier meetings, when we were discussing some of the transients that were on private property that were either on drugs or alcohol, because of the being no room in the jails, the low barrier was suggested because there was no place to go. We had passed the no camping ban. So what the intention wasn't to allow people to abuse drugs, but it was a place they would go because there's no room in jail and they can't be on private property. And that was sort of...
So it's a junior jail.
It was sort of like the intermediate way to start working on the problem.
Good evening, everyone. I love the idea of having the low barrier. It's a long term, as you all know, and I like the way you guys are going tonight. Seems to be making a lot of sense to me. Let's call everyone together, please. We're not going to get anywhere, like it was said before, somebody's doing this and someone's doing that, and someone else comes up with a bright idea and they start doing something. We all need to be pulled together and work together as a community to help the homeless. I support that recommendation that you're going to make to the council. And if there's anything I can do personally to help, let me know. Thank you.
Get her name.
Jill Plagic Ryan.
Okay, any other public comment on the item that we kind of stirred around? Okay, see, did we have any, bring it back to the task force? So, yes, go ahead.
One, they addressed I think Art brought up the idea of the whole thing about the merchants thing. I think another thing in order for the future of this task force is if merchants do have a problem, they need to come to this and present it, and not just have it floating out there somewhere. And then it becomes a big issue that we don't know what is the bottom line issue. If they would come and directly inform us, I think it would be very helpful for us to be able to work on it directly. That's one thing. The other thing is I do put on a consortia every quarter, and that's a gathering of all the service people of any kind that do anything good for the community, any kind of a service. And that happens quarterly. It's open to anybody that wants information about what groups do or what they can provide or how they can help, or what are some of the problems that they're facing in providing these services. So that's something that anybody's more than welcome to attend. I will be attending a meeting at the hospital next week. Whoever brought it up about the hospital not participating in something, they're having a meeting for a number of community representatives to talk about how the hospital can help in the future with the community and their involvement in relation to the health issues that are presented from the lack of nutrition, the homeless, all of these different kinds of things. So that is afoot in that respect. But I don't know where it's going or what's going to happen, but that at least is going to be a conversation for a minute. And then the last one, over many, many, many years, I took care of shelters and disasters. And there are specific rules before a shelter can be opened by the Red Cross, which costs the community nothing. The shelters, once it's declared a major disaster, this is the issue of the big disasters going down to the fairgrounds. Once the city or the county declare it a disaster, it opens the doors for FEMA funding through the state and through the federal government. And so the funding for a shelter itself is in place, and these places are pre-designated. They have a contents list. We meet with the people all the time about what, if something happens, how do we do this? And for years, every pocket in this county had a team that would put together these immediate shelters, including winter heating shelters and summer cooling shelters. Somehow or another, the county has gotten away from this. It's not necessarily the city itself, but the counties have gotten away from that notification that there is a problem or an issue. But what needs to be done is that people need to go to the county and make their concerns loudly heard that this is a problem. Now, I know they have, because they have announced in the paper several times they're not opening a warming shelter. But in those, that is considered a disaster, not a large scale one, but a small one. And like a level 1 is what they call it. And there are people ready to activate immediately. There have been. The cost is nothing to the county or the city. It's all done by Red Cross and volunteers. And these are open usually for 3 days at a certain barrier of temperature. And so those things have to be in place before it can be opened for no cost to the community. So that's kind of something that the Red Cross should be jumping on all over the place up here. And we used to have it, so I don't know anymore. I'm not part of that anymore because of the problems with it. So it's been out there, it can happen, and people can do it without city or county other than, and even that can't happen unless the county notifies the Red Cross people that they need the shelter open, and by law of the Red Cross, they have to have a shelter open within 2 hours of notification by the county. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of complexities there, but it should be addressed at the county level that would include whatever services or wherever it is that they establish a shelter, including the fairgrounds. The fairgrounds is always a standby. Problem with that is that the fairgrounds also can be a standby for the fire crews. And so that has to be weighed out a little bit, of which one are they going to use it for, depending on the location of the event, of the fire or whatever it is. So there's some history there, and it's a possibility, but I think people are going to have to yell a little bit about it to get it back on track the way it should be in every community. And it can be by volunteers from even Don Pedro or even our little pockets. You can have 5 or 6 people ready to launch should they be notified. And there would be a center available or a place established, a church, a local community center or something where that can happen. So that is a possibility. I would think someone could look into.
Thank you.
And that's my word for that.
Okay, any other discussion?
There's also something true, isn't there, that the police department, there's 3 or 4 policemen and there's some fire. We've met a couple of times and I don't know what you're calling that, the group that is meeting concerning the homeless and the issues.
We just have basically it's a collaboration group. We call it a community engagement team within our police department. And basically we're meeting with stakeholders within the community on non-agendized type meetings and share resources.
Yes.
And that's basically what it is. A way to share resources and we're offering our officers to act as maybe an escort for outreach programs into some areas where people who do have outreach opportunities shouldn't go by themselves. So.
And when does that be?
We generally, right now we're meeting once a month. I don't have the date. That Sergeant Wirtz, Tim Wirtz, who's here, he schedules the dates and puts those notifications out. But it is monthly for now, and we gauge as we go along whether it's going to be monthly or every other month, or just depends on
as needed.
What the who shows up is feeling. So.
No, I do have to say this, is that there's definitely varying opinions in the room, but everyone is civil. And when we're civil to one another, we do come up with some sort of accomplishment. And as much as it seems like it may be taking too much time, I gotta agree, there's people out there, there's children out there that are homeless, that are, I get it. Eventually I'll come out with my story where a year ago I was homeless and it was no fault of my own and I had no control over. I kind of ended up in a situation like Carol, but did everything right and I was there. So it's good to have varying opinions. We can work together, we can focus on the things that we can agree on, and then we can go from there. So I'm just very thankful that we're all sitting in a room getting along, very civil to one another.
Wait till the meeting's over. Anything? So I think we're...
Can I ask a question that doesn't pertain to any of this that maybe you guys could address in 2 weeks? Because you guys are going to reconvene in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, and for the homeless. I mean, for the...
Yeah, correct. I just have a question about something that I've been reading on, and maybe you guys can answer it in a couple weeks to give you the time to do the research. Do you guys think you could do that, or?
Well,
like to create an agenda item for next time, I think is what he's asking.
Yeah.
Do you do that at the end?
Well, we should have probably done that in a public forum, actually.
I'm sorry.
I'll tell you what,
Let me talk to you afterwards?
Yeah, exactly.
That's fine.
I think that's the best way to do it.
That's not a problem at all.
That's the best way to do it, and we can...
No problem. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, are we... know where we're going, I hope. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting till 2 weeks from today, 22nd. Thank you, Jim.